you're able to answer correctly and say, listen, I'm building a hotel. I might be laying this brick now, but the end goal is a hotel.
Yeah. And I think for me, when you sort of look at, when you sort of look at the entrepreneurial mindset, I think just zooming it in and honing it in from an entrepreneurial perspective, what sort of mind, or maybe let's, I just want to take the mindset question and park it, right?
Yeah.
How important is a routine?
Sure, very
Right,
important.
because we hear this conversation around routines. You I've watched a lot of YouTube videos and podcasts, and they talk of highly successful business leaders, athletes, anyone who's very successful in their career, building up a routine. How important is a routine, and how does one sort of get into building themselves up into their own routine?
So a routine gives you structure. If you look at entrepreneurs, I think, well, it's my own observation, majority of them probably have ADHD. So we have, our minds are just running wild because there's so many ideas that we have, and then we sometimes lack some sort of structure. And what a routine does, when you introduce a routine, it brings you back to having set times of doing certain things. So for instance, if you've got a gym routine, for a fact, if you wake up at 5 a.m., like most entrepreneurs do, you know that at 5 a.m., I'm awake, I'm going to the gym. What that does is that obviously it forces you to sleep slightly earlier because you can't sleep at 3 knowing very well that you have to be awake at 5 a.m., right? And then also, it puts you in a position to plan your day because it becomes some sort of something that you do repeatedly. So for me, how it has worked for me is that a routine keeps me in check because then I don't wander off doing other things because I know for a fact that there are certain things that I have to do as a ritual. I think part of what makes a routine work is having some sort of rituals. And by rituals, I don't mean spooky spiritual rituals.
Yeah.
I just mean that one thing that you do every single day, whether it rains, whether it's hot, that's your ritual. So if gym is your ritual, you're absolutely going to look good because that's something that you do on a daily basis. Health-wise, how you breathe, you feel healthy because of the ritual that you have, which is going to gym. And that routine, because a ritual ends up being part of your routine, then that routine ends up building discipline in you. You know for a fact that certain disciplines have to take place at certain moments, at certain times, every single day. And those routines ultimately form part of our standards, one way or another.
What is your routine?
My routine, my daily routine.
Yeah, your daily, what is your routine, and is it a set routine?
Not always set. However, I wake up at the same time every day. I wake up between 5 o'clock and 5:30. The first 30 minutes to an hour of my mornings, I sit down and write my thoughts. So they don't necessarily have to be grand ideas or grand thoughts, but I just sit down and I write on my table. I write, obviously on a notebook or whatever. I write what I have, whatever is coming from my mind, primarily focusing on my own personal development. So that would be myself. That's the focus. My family, right? Where do I see my family going? Where do I see my daughter in the next 20 years? It could be where do I see her in the next hour or 2 hours? Doesn't matter. Whatever the thought comes. And then thirdly, I write on my business. My business journey. What are the thoughts and the ideas that are coming up that I could document on paper? What I've seen is that because it's so early in the morning, my mind is still fresh and it's working perfectly because I've rested. Then after that, that's about 30 to an hour. Then I go to the gym. Then I exercise. Now that I've exercised my mind, now I exercise my body. So also, I'm a spiritual person. I pray, but I don't necessarily kneel down and pray and spend time with God like most people do. I spend time with God throughout the day. So part one, when I'm going to the gym exercising, I'll be talking to God. If I'm with a trainer, obviously I don't do that. But in my own space, that's what I do. Then 7:30 I have to take my daughter to school. By 8 o'clock I have to be in the office. Usually that's what happens every single morning, except if it's a Saturday and a Sunday. But I will be writing first thing in the morning when I wake up.
So you were able to, in your busy schedule, right? You were able to start writing a book, right? And finish it in record time, put the book out there, and have it fully published. So initially, at an initiate stage, whenever we start or want to start a new thing, and maybe you might have felt this feeling when you started writing the book
Yeah.
or you started your new business, but there are elements of doubt that sift in. How did you deal with that?
Yeah.
You know, that overthinking and that doubt that sort of comes in whenever you want to start something new, because I think sometimes it's informed by the fact that there are other practitioners who are better. Who
Yeah.
do I think I am going into this new sphere, whether it's videography, whether it's social media management? How did you work around that doubt to get to the point where you told yourself, I'm going to do this thing?
For sure. So, so when you talk about the book, other businesses, it's easy because I do that in my private space, whether I'm with my team or other business partners. With the book, it was quite different because how I started writing was I was writing a lot of posts on Facebook that were long, and they were attracting thousands and thousands of people. Some comments were positive, a lot of the comments were negative. And can I say that it is the negative comments that pushed me to say, actually, I'm going to write a book. I actually put it out there. I said, guys, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to publish it, and thousands of you are going to buy it. I had not even written the first chapter of the book. Then I started writing the book because now there was pressure. Too many eyes were looking at me. I said, I'm going to write a book. Within 2 months, I was done writing the book. Surprisingly enough, people say they take years to write books. I took only 2 months. But I have to say, maybe it's because also there was COVID, and the book is only 256 pages instead of 500 pages, right? So, and then I had that published. Part of me wanted to prove a point to myself that I can do it, and then also to prove a point to the naysayers. So sometimes what I'm saying is sometimes it's important to have a point to prove, even if it's to yourself, to say, dude, I know you can do this. You want to start the business? It doesn't, you see, you mentioned something about having the fear of, but there are other people who are doing it. There are other people doing it, but they're not me. They don't think like I do. They don't speak like I do. They don't write like I do. There can only be one me. And how I look at it is that also one has to have a very high self-esteem. I don't think you can be a successful entrepreneur without thinking highly of yourself, where you think that when I start a project, I'm going to finish it.
Now, just give me an idea. So personal development is something that's very important. I remember years ago, one gentleman saying, if you can spend 500 Rand on hair, why can't